Thanks so much for joining me today on More Than Good Food, the podcast, where our goal is to have honest conversations with women about what it means to live a healthy life. I'm your host, Brooke Gordon, and you're listening to Season 2. This whole season so far, I've been joined by my friend, my sister, my fellow podcaster, who is a coach. She is a blogger. She is on the podcast, she just got nominated as the pick of the month by Podcast Magazine. So super excited for that. She is a business owner. She is a speaker and author, just an all-around amazing human, Meaghan Jackson, I should say. And together we've been exploring all the different things that just help bring us back to focus when we're living in this type of environment where it's virtual, it's back-to-back meetings. And so today we're talking about TechNeck and what happens with the impact of this technology on us. And so I wanted to just start off by saying, Meaghan, so glad you're here to join us today.
Thank you. When you describe me, I sound incredibly busy and I'm just tired listening to that. No wonder I'm so tired all the
time. That's a whole other conversation you and I are going to have. But I wanted to start off with just, this concept that the weight of our big, beautiful brains, that's actually a tremendous amount of force that comes down into our shoulders and our neck muscles when we drop our head. So when we're doing this, and how much of our life is spent exactly in this position. Right. And I just want to show that from the side where you're like this, right? Can you see that curve, Meaghan?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And when we have that, that can result in stiffness, in soreness. If you're getting headaches, maybe even a tingling sensation in your arms or your fingers, that can be a sign that it's just too much, that the body structurally wasn't ready for that. It's more than it can physically handle in our joints, and that can sometimes be the cause of it. And the challenge, of course, is that our bodies get better at the things that we practice. So when we spend a lot of time looking down at our screens, then there are tangible structural changes that take place in the bones and the ligaments and the joints to help compensate for this like forward head posture. And the one that I see that, I call it the hedgehog, right? Like the tiny little curled up hedgehog. But the other one that I see is sort of the curl forward for the keyboard, and then the neck comes back, and you can see like this almost right angle crunch in the back of the neck. So these are some of the places where it can physically show up. So that's the conversation we're going to have today. So my question for you, and I'll just speak for myself to start. I went and had I'll say pleasure is probably the right word, but I was able to go and see for massage therapy, and my therapist had said, wow, like even in the couple of months since they had seen me last, they had noticed a change in me, and not necessarily a good one. They had seen this rounding in the back. So is this something that you've noticed in yourself or in the boys, these sort of structural changes?
Yes. Fortunately, not so fortunately, I have metal rods in my back, so I'm at least got a bit of reinforcement, but definitely have noticed my neck bending more than it obviously was designed ever to do. And I've noticed that in my oldest, who is constantly on the computer more than the other two who aren't as into like Zoom calls and things like that. So that's something he needs to be aware of, because, and we talk about it, but it's one of those things that I come across more nagging than, this is what you look like. It's not supposed to be that way. Another thing that is, I don't know if you've noticed it, but a lot of people, including myself, we take the laptop seriously in the name and we hold it on our lap. But that's too low. So then you're up on your tippy toes without thinking of it, trying to hold it to a reasonable height. So then your feet and your legs are actually also being affected in all of this too. It's not just your neck, because now you're like holding the whole thing up on your lap and your toes, trying to bring it to the right height. I find my arms, I can never get them the right height with my either my desk or my chair. It's either too low, too high. I know we both played the piano and I'm trying to hold it right, but you can never get it the right position. And so you always get like, either your wrists are getting cut off circulation or you're holding them too high, and our bodies just were not designed to be sitting still like this.
Not at all. And it's interesting you say that, because I've noticed it the most in your oldest. And I think back even, well, at least 2 years ago, which is when I actually got to see him more regularly. But he had, I would say, because your boys have always been out and playing outside, and that's been a key tenet to part of your education curriculum with them. And I remember his ability to balance and his sense of almost of grace when he moved. And I've seen some of that start to be less, maybe, than it was even 2 years ago. And he be early teen, preteen, tween now, is that?
He's turning 13 next week. So,
Oh.
and so a lot of parents attribute it to just teenagers, and no, they're just teenagers and they're tall and they're lanky. And yet that is totally some of it. I mean, my story goes back to when I was a teenager and I just grew too fast for my own body and couldn't support it structurally. But a lot of it does have to do, especially with all this online schooling that they're all doing. And if they're not specifically online schooling, the only way to connect currently is by video, right? So they're doing more video games, they're doing more messaging, they're just online a whole lot more, and we're accepting it and we're trying to embrace it so that they can stay connected with their friends, but it certainly isn't helping anybody's posture at all.
No, not at all. And it's interesting you say that, because I mean, one of the things I mentioned, I'm seeing it in me, and I'm, I coach about this. I'm highly aware of it, and yet still doing it. And I think in one of our other episodes, we talked about that passage of time, right? And being tethered to the device, and just being completely spatially unaware of how much time has passed. And so you couple that, and I couple that with the fact that I'm now sitting still in this position. Well, my body's practicing and helping me to stay there, because the body's incredibly efficient. And now it's practicing staying in this somewhat uncomfortable position, and yet it becomes comfortable because we structurally change to adapt.
So
Which
I
is
hadn't even thought of that. That's scary.
right. I mean, the beautiful thing is it can be unwound, but it took time to get there. It takes time to unwind. I mean, one of the things I really enjoy is every evening before bed, I have one of those, a foam roller. It's a tube, about that big around, about that long, and it's almost like a pool noodle, but a bit bigger and a little bit harder. And I lay on that. Um, I lay across it, lengthwise, so be sort of perpendicular to my body direction, and I take different points along the back, and I just lay there and I breathe. And it now becomes such a lovely feeling, because it opens up through here, which is where I carry a lot of my tension. So for me, it's a really beautiful, sometimes I'll have a pop or a crack, or some kind of a tension release that happens while I'm in that position. So I've made that part of my daily practice. It doesn't, it's not enough, but it still feels lovely. Is there
Great.
anything that you guys do in terms of movement, or anything that just with intention to try and unwind some of this?
Well, it's all about being intentional and being aware of it so that you can plan that into your day more. So for us, outside time is actually on their school schedule. And so they need to make sure that they have fit in that outside time. And we talked last time about making it more than just standing outside. You got to be doing the movement. And so I'm checking in with them regularly. We also keep now track of our outside time, because I'm a big nature foresty fan. There's an Instagram account. There's a website called 1,000 Hours Outside. And we got a tracking chart from them. And so we've been tracking our hours monthly to see how many hours outside we are approximately each month. And it's been going up regularly, mostly because the weather's nicer, but also because we're being more intentional about it. And it's a fun visual for the kids to see how much time are we actually spending outside, but definitely putting that in. And I talked to my boys about it. That was one of our agreements and rules around screen time, because every family has to navigate that with their children, what is important to them. And I know from their behavior afterwards, because we've talked about it with them, that you're pent up, you've been sitting too long, your behavior is worse, you're wild and crazy. So part of their agreement is after they're done on screens, they need to go and burn that off. They need to exercise, run it off, and not engage with their siblings right away because they're not as friendly. So, but that's something we've actually worked into surrounding screen time and everything.
Oh, I love that. I love that a lot. And I mean, ultimately, we're talking about, as part of this whole series is about stress, right? And one of the things that we haven't really talked about that I think also factors into this is, I think about that intentional time outside, but then, when I am on my screen, I'm very lucky. For the most part, I have a reliable internet connection. And then every so often you'll see this little message pops up that says you have an unstable connection. And that sense of panic that comes in, especially, as if you're in a video conference or you're recording or, all these different ways to have to be on. And then you add on to that the stress of, okay, well, now I've dedicated this time, I am required to be on screen and I can't do the thing that I'm doing. And for yourself, you are a speaker. I know you're part of like a larger conference even this week. How do you deal with that? What's some of your experience?
It has been incredibly stressful. Technology has been, it's got its place, but it has caused so much stress in my life. Even just the other day, I was doing a podcast radio interview and I thought I had tested all the equipment and had it all set up. Like in my mind, I was organized. And luckily, a lot of us who are on screens a lot and have all these meetings, we're planning that in to allow like 15, half an hour of setup time if you're meeting with someone else, just in case there's these computer glitches. But still, that stress was there. We couldn't find my mic. No idea where it was. So then I'm having to, we still don't know where it is. And so I'm having to scream at my son to grab his gaming headphones. And then none of the computers were hooking to my new iPhone. And so we had to hunt down an older phone that happened to have cellular. And our internet is so bad, so bad where we are, that we even had two lines. We've had to drop one line. We've moved on to cellular. And then we're playing piggyback on every single person. We can have like one person online at a time, and every other device has to be like, are you online? You're cutting me off. I was getting dropped out of my own coaching calls. And I would have to tell the people, wait there. Like if you lose me, hang on, I'll be back in. Like, it's so embarrassing, adds to that stress. So yeah, all these technology issues, what has helped me is to plan extra time. Now that I know what works and what doesn't, I'm honest with people. And I say, if you're going to lose me, I'll hop back on. I had to let go of my YouTube channel because just loading it was too much for our house. And then I'd have to go into town to tap into some free Wi-Fi. That was just like ridiculous. Like, it's not practical. So I've had to change my business, how I run my business. I've now dropped the coaching calls for a while just because it wasn't going to work over the winter. So just being proactive and adjusting helped reduce my stress because I didn't feel guilty. I just was just honest with people.
Well, I'll start by commending you for seeing, rather than continuing to carry the stress, to actually make the decision to make a change, to essentially eliminate the cause of tension around that. So bravo, really glad to hear that. And the other piece that I love that you said in that was, that just being honest with people. And even this morning, I was part of a show, literally an hour on tech check. We were on a separate channel from, like, on the live channel in the background. So there was a significant lag in the camera versus the voice, but I was live with them with the real voice. And so, the whole piece was there, and it comes to my turn to say my piece, and nothing's working. And yet we'd done the tech check, like, everything should have been fine. And for some reason, they couldn't connect my mic. And so they had to cut me from the visual, and then their tech person's, can you refresh and we'll try again? And I was like, oh my gosh, it's so embarrassing, because the last thing you want when you come online is to start, can you hear me? It's the, you're on mute, and can you hear me? These are like the catchphrases of 2020 and now 2021. Now, being on, that's another piece, because, here we are. So there's, I'll say, an intensity that's required to be on, when you're presenting. And a great example of that was, for me, I had to present. I was very fortunate. I did get an opportunity to have an appointment for my vaccine, and I did have symptoms afterwards, and I had to be on a call. And even though my part was just a few minutes, the energy that I had to bring to that wasn't energy that I had. And as soon as I hung up for the call, I crawled right into bed and had to have a nap. And now that's not normal for me, but it just really reinforced for me the amount of energy that it takes to have that sort of intensity of being on, whether it's a video conference or speaking. And then you combine that, I've got a light behind me, I've got two screens with me, I've got, you've got something similar. And so now add on to that some eye strain, right? And it's just amplifying that mental fatigue. And so part of being tethered to our device is not just the stress of connection and the physical stress of, posture, but now also this mental fatigue. So you're a speaker, you're involved in a lot of different events. Tell me about you. Do you have this, how do you manage your energy? I'll start there.
Um, it's one of those things, you have to build a buffer around that. If you think about it, before, if you were going to a meeting, or going to present somewhere, you would have that driving time, and you would have that quiet, that buffer around leaving and coming back and setting up. Now, because we're either in your workplace and everything's gone virtual, or you're at home, there isn't that buffer. We tend to look at our schedule and say, okay, I can do back-to-back meetings. Not that you should be, but there isn't that time to move between meetings and to have that break. So I try to make sure that if I've got an event, even just a podcast interview, and I'm quite comfortable with those now, after a while, that's it for my day. Like I plan one thing, two if I have to, but I plan one thing a day so that I have that buffer around me to do other things, just to mentally, because when you're having all these meetings and everything, you also have your whole script in your mind, all the answers to all the questions. And then you also want to look good on camera. And a lot of us are uncomfortable seeing yourself. Like when I'm talking to a person face to face, I don't have my own picture. So I'm also focusing on my hair and what's in the background. And is my kid going to burst in and ruin this whole thing? And we're going to have to re-record. Again, it's being honest. I think now that it's been over a year, people are a lot more relaxed and used to it. So that's good. But yeah, building that space, and feeling more prepared, and just being more accepting. A lot of it is giving yourself grace and accepting things that just, this is how it's going to look today.
The two things that really jumped out, three things that really jumped out. Yes, absolutely. Giving yourself grace, 100%. I think, and knowing that others are giving you grace. And I think that's an important factor. But also that space, that buffer that you talked about. And even as we're talking about it, it sort of dawned on me that I guess I hadn't made that full connection. But that time to, drive to where you were supposed to be, you'd build in extra time for that anyways, because traffic is unpredictable. And so you have this, not only this sort of mental buffer where, maybe you're on a call while you're in the car, but at some point you had that buffer space to just be with your thoughts and prepare for whatever your script was. But you also had to move, right? It wasn't click off, click on the next one. It was, you had to physically get up, you had to get dressed, get ready, get into your car, drive. Now, granted, you're sitting, but you've still moved, and then, you have to get to wherever the venue is. And so there's physical movement that was happening. You at least got up out of your setup, and then you had this mental buffer. And I think, I've thought about this from a meeting perspective as well, that how many people keep saying, oh, I miss the hallway conversations. And yes, absolutely, of course. But there was also time when you were co-located with someone. So if you were meeting with them, you could say something like, I have to run to the washroom, or, I'll just be a few minutes, or, I haven't had anything to drink. Why don't we go and get a coffee together, or tea, or water? I highly recommend water. But we don't have that anymore. When you're on the call, you're not togethering that activity. And instead you're just go, 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 click off of this meeting and quickly bounce right into the next. And it's exhausting.
Yeah, it feels like we're just on TV shows all the time. And you wanna try to be professional and look good. So you don't wanna be, drinking or having your water or have something showing. And yeah, it's just changed everything. Definitely.
Now that we say that, this is me taking a sip of water and hoping I don't choke on it. So the other thing I wanted to say is, because I know I do this, do you find you take on a different persona when you're speaking versus casual conversation?
Totally.
Okay, tell me about what that looks like for you.
And again, I think it depends on the nature of my meeting. But if I'm doing a speech, like if I'm doing a presentation, a workshop, or a podcast interview, I'm definitely more, I don't know if it's like upbeat, cheesy television type thing going on, because I want to, what, it's just a lot more professional sounding. And I don't, yeah. Now, see, now I'm stumbling because I'm more comfortable with you. There's a lot less like joking around and being more relaxed and not minding about the interruptions and things. If I'm doing just a one-on-one or talking in a more familiar setting, I'm just a little more myself. I'm a little more who I used to be, who I'm normally, and a little less uptight and trying to be all remembering my points and just presenting who I want them to see,
And I love that you're saying that, and that you're so honest about that. And I think part of it is because it has to do for me with that idea of grace, because you know me, and even when I don't know someone, it's still one-on-one, and I feel like I'm going to assume they'll give me grace, and we'll build a relationship together. And I equally am giving them grace as well as to myself. Whereas when you're presenting in front of a group, you know that most of the people there don't know you. There's not a relationship there. All you have, it really is a commercial. And so for me, I definitely have a speaking voice. And even I've noticed, so two funny things. You and I, when we're talking, we've known each other our whole lives. And so I am very comfortable with you. I am off. But and similarly, I don't like looking at myself. So my screen right now, in all transparency, you are on this side and my bullet points are on this side over my face. So I can't see me. So I'm not distracted by me. And also I can keep us on track for where our conversation is going. So rest assured, we are actually following a conversation plan. But the other thing that I find is that when I do that, I take on a different tone. And I've realized this, like listening back to our recordings, that I can tell the parts that I've prepared versus the parts that are ad lib, and that there's this tone change. That so now that I'm hearing it, that we have this duality, I'm hearing that tone change. And in fact, I did a talk just this week, actually. It aired on Monday, and it was with a friend of mine, Danielle, who really inspired this whole podcast series. And so my spouse was listening to it because I had it playing in the kitchen. I was listening. You always kind of want to hear it. It's the first time I'd heard it since I recorded it, and I wanted to listen to it. And he was like in the other room and actually said to himself, wow, that person uses a lot of the same phrases that Brooke does. And then it took him another few seconds after that before he realized it was me. So my own spouse didn't recognize me listening to me because I have this on voice. And so, yeah, that's something that I've become very aware that I do, for sure.
Well, as you're saying that, I feel like you only get one chance in some of these. You want to impress. It is like a commercial. You only get the one chance to speak sometimes to people in meetings. And then I find when I'm prepared more, it's sort of like I have this confident, but teachery voice. But it also is a little less, I'm trying more and more, but it's a little less playful, I guess. Like there's less jokey. It's a lot more serious sounding, especially when I'm doing some solo podcast episodes, but I'm reading a little more scripted. It sounds more scripted, I guess, is what the wording I'm looking for. So I encourage those, to try to have bullet points rather than scripting. And add in a bit more of your personality. I feel like you lose a little bit of personality when you're stressed about trying to impress so many people. But really, they want to get to know who you are. So letting those jokes fly, letting your, whatever mannerisms you have, be yourself. But it is harder in front of a screen. And also multiple screens when you have like a Zoom call with like tons of people on there and you can't even see half the people you're speaking to. So you feel like you're just talking to nobody. And then that's very awkward too. I have one of my good friends, she's now, and I'm really impressed, like you said, knowing what works for you and letting go of opportunities that aren't. If you are able to, she realized that there were certain like the pre-recorded things she didn't feel as natural, rather than the ones where she could get some feedback from the audience and see just by their, like, if were they even listening, how are they responding to her, just with the nods that you're doing right now. It's a lot more easy to keep talking when you know that there's someone engaging back with you, rather than this blank screen and you're just hoping that you're coming across well. There's no instant feedback.
It's very hard. And I've been a faculty member at McMaster University for over a decade now. And we actually had our debrief last night for this past year. And my teaching partner and I really found it challenging this year for that reason. And then I found out our director and basically all of my colleagues had the same thing. They're like, I've been telling this joke for years and everybody laughs. And it just fell not only silent, but I was like, but I know it's funny. and so here you have these people who are, very confident in their material, very, they're experts in their field, and they're struggling with, and this is live, and really all you have is the chat. You're literally speaking to a black screen because all the cameras are off, and you're hoping that someone in the chat will say something. And even then, normally what you might get is maybe 1-2 people who will comment in the chat, and then a whole bunch of people who might add in like an emoji to the comment. And it's such a different way of communicating that it feels totally natural. Like if I was on Instagram, that would feel totally normal. But like an Instagram live, that is exactly what you get. But when you're in more of a speaking style, it can be really uncomfortable as a speaker because you just don't know, am I doing the right thing? And then self-doubt really creeps in hard in that moment. Pack onto that, you're feeling half blind to begin with because you've got all this lighting around you. And so now
Yeah, this ring light is blinding me.
Oh, mine too. So I was going to say, I picked up a pair of one of these how stylish is this? Now I probably have to,
Oh,
yeah.
you look ridiculous.
Okay, so I'll just take those back off again. But I ended up getting these blue light glasses, and they've got a little bit sort of a yellowish tinge to them. Do they help? I have no idea. Like, I'm not really seeing, I haven't really found a lot of science behind showing that they totally work. When I wear them, do I feel less tired? Not necessarily. I don't know that I do. I think psychologically I feel better when I wear them. Um, but at the same time, I end up catching more glare off of these than I did without them. So I'm kind of torn as to whether or not they're good. So if you're listening and you use blue light glasses and you know whether or not they work, or you have a brand that has really worked for you, I'd love to hear from you, and I'd love to hear more about that for sure.
I thought of something
Yeah.
while you were talking. Um, because the whole thing today is talking about like tech neck and how you're sitting, and the whole premise of what you talk about always is about, joy and stress. And another thing that I've noticed, and especially in one of my children who has opted out of Zoom calls, so he is actually connecting way less with his peers and has been struggling to do any online classes or anything. He struggles with communication. And a lot of business people, especially, I don't want to stereotype, but there's certain professions where um, that human interaction, we're not seeing the hand gestures. You can't see my hands moving. It's harder with the Zoom delays. There's that lag. And so there's a lot of miscommunication. And for people who struggle with that and rely on either like the mouth reading, or even without noticing it, it's people who rely on lip reading or hand gestures, or people's physical body to interact with them in communication, are really finding this an added stress, or that it's just not even working. So if you are finding that stressful, again, talk to people and let them know, because again, we're all struggling, and I feel like we feel like we're an island and that we're the only one, and it's embarrassing. But you'd be surprised at how many other people are finding the same issue. When I mentioned it, I there was like everybody's kids were feeling the same way. So but there's other ways of communicating. So maybe you'd be just going to be doing more emailing, or maybe there is a way to meet socially distanced. Like you got to speak up for yourself, know what your body can handle and what works best for you, and then speak up for yourself. Don't be afraid to voice that, and just present it as an option. You might be surprised at how many other people are also finding the same things.
I love that. And I think thank you for sharing that, Meaghan. And I think the two things that come out of that is absolutely speaking up for yourself. But the other one is the self-reflection, because we intuitively go to the place that feels comfortable. And so opting out of the meetings, maybe being silent in the meetings because you're not comfortable to participate, or you're not catching everything that's happening and it's too much. And so you'd rather say nothing at all than say the wrong thing. And so part of that is also, I'd say, the self-reflection. How did I feel today? Did I have trouble communicating with who? And do I know why?
Mhm.
And I think that can help to add to that as well.
Yeah, totally. And even like asking for a replay of a meeting. A lot of them are recorded, or ask, can you record it so that I can go back and go over the points later? And you'd be surprised at how many other people would appreciate that you spoke up and be like, oh my gosh, yes, please. I'd love a replay of our meeting because I missed something, or I got cut off, or whatever it is. Yeah, try to be brave and speak up for yourself if you can.
And transcripts is
Yeah,
a
yeah, that's another.
fabulous one.
Yeah.
So many services now offering that was something that was highly coveted, paid for service in the past, and now transcripting is widely available. So that's another option there as well, which is awesome. The
Mhm.
other one I wanted to suggest is, it's not really along the themes of joy, but it is along that theme of giving yourself grace, and throughout the day, just giving your eyes a break. like
Yes.
actually looking away. Like I think of the amount of light that I have. So like it's a lot of light right now, plus light behind me. And during the day, the houses behind me like cream white. And so I've got this glare coming off of them as well. And at times it's actually almost embarrassing. No amount of lighting is going to fix the fact that I look reflective. Like it's pretty bad. And so, but then I think of how exhausting that is for my eyes. And so there's something called the 20-20-20 rule. Have you heard of this one before?
Uh, Briefly.
So every 20 minutes, look at something 20 feet away for 20 seconds. And so it's a chance to literally, you're going to look out towards the horizon for just 20 seconds. And in doing so, it's a chance for you to just let yourself breathe for a minute. You kind of let your mind rest for a minute, and you let your eyes rest for a minute. And the catch to that, of course, is being able to do that in the context of having that light, like you have to still deal with the light, right? And that's something to take into consideration. So I'm going to actually just quickly set this because I want to show how long 20 seconds is. So during that 20 seconds, the two things you can do, you can rest your eyes again by looking out to the horizon, but I'm also going to suggest that you show me a double chin. Like actually, like let me do that from the side. So when you're doing this, you kind of want to almost like give yourself a double chin to just, as opposed to being here, which is where we often are, like just lifting that crown of the head up and really tucking at it. And I guess if you're listening to audio, it's really letting that chin come back and in, letting that crown of your head float up to the ceiling, and just feeling incredibly tall. Can you feel a difference in yourself?
Oh yeah. Feels
Like
good. It's like a good stretch.
instantaneously, right? I know. It's so okay. So let's do that together. So I'm setting a timer. Here we go. Okay. And we're gonna hold that for 20 seconds and just breathe. Just, you can close your eyes, absolutely. And just keep feeling the crown of your head float up to the ceiling. Really notice that feeling, almost a closure across the throat. That's it. That's 20 seconds right there. That's all that it took. Just like 3 breaths, maybe, not even. And just that ability to just rest for just that moment and to sort of reset your neck. It's also a great time to just get up, go to the bathroom, to have a bit of water. Um, that alone can just help to recirculate the blood and lymph, right? Because our lymph system, which is what helps remove the waste in the body, is it runs sort of alongside your muscles and your veins, but it needs your muscles to pump it. There's no heart, right? And in doing so, when we're sitting all day, it literally is stagnant because there's very little motion. As you say, like maybe your hands, but even then, if you're typing, it's just your fingers that are moving. And so that's a great thing to have happen. And then just simply your neck is going to be in a different position because you got up and you're looking around and you're doing things. And so you're just naturally going to get a little bit more movement in through your body that way.
You are also saying look 20 feet away. Well, I'm staring at a wall right in front of me. So you do need to get up and move. So your eyes, like I'm thinking of all the strain that's putting on my eyes. If my eyes are a muscle, like my prescription probably changing over the years because all I'm doing is looking directly in front of me. Like I'm not giving my eyes a chance to see anything else, to look around if I'm always staring directly at a device right in front of me. And I can't look farther because there's a wall right in front of me. So yeah, giving your eyes a break. And I find, and we were talking about this, the time lapse. And all of a sudden my eyes, they're strained and I get bloodshot eyes or I get migraines. And I can tell those days when I've been on screens too much. And it's like, I can't even check my mail because I've hit beyond my limit. I can't even do my basics because I push too hard. So giving your eyes as much rest as they can and that movement piece. I was just listening to a speaker tonight about nutrition and movement and everything. And she was reminding everyone like your brain is a muscle too. Well, the only way it's going to get that blood supply is if you're moving, to get the blood pumping, to get it to your brain. And you might actually, again, it helps with your concentration, and it helps with clarity and everything, because you are getting that movement in. And I feel like we're cutting off the blood supply to your head there if it's all crooked and in weird positions that it's not meant to be.
And now, granted, I don't see me, but I know I've got a definite head tilt thing that I need to, well, I want to work on. I don't need to work on, but I want to work on, because I that's part of, I end up with I mean, we're not
Yeah.
perfect by any means. We're not symmetric. None of us are perfect, but we're certainly not symmetric. And so these things do show up, but that's normal and natural. And it's from a long-standing habits of all kinds of reasons. I think of some of my clients who, one of them had called me and she's like, I'm in so much pain and I don't know what to do. And, after talking to her for a bit, it was like, have you considered picking up your toddler from the other side? And it was the scoop and hip, right?
Yeah.
And now you end up with a whole thing happening. And I said, you've gotten used to picking up the weight from that one side. So, at a minimum, rather than picking him up from the other side, pick him up like straight on, but just try the other hip. And then you can start to build up some structural tolerance for holding on the other side. It won't be comfortable at first because you're not used to it, right? You've gotten comfortable with this twist. So it'll take a little bit of practice. And the next day I got a text message saying, oh, wow, yep, that's exactly what it was. Right? So we do get used to these things. We get used to a place of comfort. I definitely have one side I prefer to sleep on over the other, in terms of being a side sleeper, and all of that just comes naturally, and that's okay. The other thing that I found made a really big difference, and this is one I definitely recommend having a conversation with other people on your team, is all of my calendars book things to 30 and 60 minutes. And so that whole, I just need 5 minutes, just even to, finish typing up my notes and jump into the next one. But you feel rude speaking up for yourself, saying, I've got a meeting in 5 minutes. Well, so does everyone else on the call. And yet we fill the time because the time's been booked. And so I actually was able to go into my settings. I figured out how to do it from a friend and change them to be 25 minutes and 45-minute meetings as the default. And I even booked 6-minute meetings, because if I was standing in the hallway, that's probably the most time that we would spend together, if not less. And so since I'm not seeing them very often, I figured, you have to start off with, hey, how's it been? How are you doing? It's so nice to see you. Okay, here's my question. And I knew that's all that we'd need. And so that's another thing to really consider. And it doesn't work for everything, and you can't do that on your phone, but at least not with the iOS system. But it's something about being intentional. And the catch is still those 45-minute meetings. You can't tune out for 20 seconds every 20 minutes. Like, there's 2 20-minute intervals there. But even if you can just look away from the screen, that might make just that tiny little bit of difference.
Yeah.
What other tricks do you have?
I really like the ones you gave about, switching that up. The other thing is, for depending on the meeting, and if it's appropriate, you can also turn off your video sometimes. So if you can, get moving behind the screen. I mean, you have to check on what's appropriate for your meeting. But if it's one where you're just more listening and your face could be there, but you don't have to be, then get moving as much as you can. And also move what parts you can't see. Get your legs up and down. It's actually, now you can do more leg movements than you could in person, because that would look weird. But you can't tell what I'm doing with my feet right now. So you could stretch your legs, get them moving, wiggle your ankles, get your arms moving. What's not on camera too. So just move as much as you can around the little box that you're in on your screen.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. I mean, for me, there's oftentimes I'm not the one on camera per se. I might be part of a webinar, or I'm there listening. So I have a very passive role in what's happening. And so for those ones, sometimes I'll take it for a walk depending on what it is. But if it's something that's high screen time, like sometimes it's just audio and I can take them for a walk with me, but other times I need to be physically present, because it's a presentation and you don't want to be walking with your screen again. But I actually moved my bicycle back up. I'm pointing behind me for those of you on audio because it's right here. I've got a bike up on a trainer here in this space. And part of why I've got this double monitor setup is because I can ride and watch and listen to whatever it is. And if it's a 60-minute meeting, well, for maybe half an hour, that I actually might be able to cycle through part of it and monitor the chat. I can see it from where I am and hop off if there's something for me to respond to. And that's it's been, I'd say, a real luxury. I'll say it, it's been a real luxury to have that flexibility to be able to do that. And it's not obviously with high judiciousness, but even the webinars that I'm interested in, you talked about listening to a speaker today. There's part of a speaker series that I've been really interested in this week, and it's a great way for me to catch that in if it's a video, because again, I don't want to be taking something with video on the road, but I can certainly do it for me on a stationary bike. So that's been another option that I've been
Another one
considering.
is to get a stand. Like my camera is not in my hand right now. It's on a stand. And as we were talking about that bent neck thing, I thought, why am I not stick it on a stand more often? I could be doing my meetings standing up. Like if you get a good stand, depending on your height, I'm unusually tall, but you could stand for part of a meeting or short meeting instead of always sitting. Or you could go hands free and put it on a stand and then now look at a better thing and check your emails from it up instead of always looking I didn't even think of that one. So now I'm going to have my stand out more often, but
Nice.
Yeah, just try different positions with your phone.
I stand when I'm
Or get
speaking for
off
sure.
the phone too and have it on a bigger screen. Like actually use your computer once in a while and do them on a computer. So it's just a bit more for your eyes. Like I move to my phone more often just because I'm on data. And it's such a pain to connect even to my computers from my cell phone. But yeah, just even the bigger screen just helps with that squinty. You're trying to read tiny words. You don't have to if you can.
Yep. Oh, I love that. I've got my laptop is stacked. So I've got a keyboard in front of me, and then my laptop is stacked up on books. And I've got, you and I went through engineering together. So I have an introduction to modern astrophysics. I have Canadian financial management, and I've got project management, the second edition. And I feel like that's the summary of all of my education right there underneath my computer.
It's putting it into good use.
100%. Never. And I've got my ring light in behind that stacked up on boxes. So yeah, you make do with what you can. Meaghan, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you so much for all of your insights. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Me too. It's always fun to chat.
It is. And thank you for listening. Be sure to check out the show notes for links, offers, details. You'll see all of that there. Again, you can find those at morethangoodfood.ca. And if you have ideas for future shows or any tips that you want to share, I'd be absolutely delighted to hear from you. Again, if you have any recommendations for those blue light glasses and whether or not they work, I'd also love to hear from you about that. So until next time, remember that living a healthy life is about more than good food.